How's everybody doing?
Good, Eric. How are you?
Can't complain. Appreciate you guys being on early. We'll get started here in a little bit. Does it look like we're waiting on like 8 more? All right. Looks like we're still waiting on a couple more, so we'll give them another minute or two before we get going. All right, everybody. So it looks like we have 15 of the 19 folks. So hopefully the rest will the rest will be hopping on here a little bit, but we certainly want to be respectful of everybody's time, and we got a lot to talk about today. So what's going to happen, we'll have Matt here in the office. There you go. Start the recording. And we're just so everybody knows, we're also live streaming. But I think the first thing that we'll do is we'll get to some introductions, and we'll make sure we'll give everybody a minute or so, especially since this is the first one. So we all know who's on the call and who we're going to be working with over these next couple of meetings, and do it more of an expedited fashion in the future. But first and foremost, just welcome everybody. A sincere thank you from me and my team for being part of this conversation moving forward, because it's certainly something that we want to make sure we're meeting the needs of our industry partners, you folks, and doing everything we can on our end to help make sure that our inventory tracking tool is working as efficiently as possible for everybody. So again, I'm sure today and the following meetings we'll have a great conversation around that. But again, thank you for offering your time. We know it's valuable, and we look forward to having these conversations. And again, just some expectation setting. Again, this conversation is going to be about Metrc, our inventory tracking system, and how we can move forward with Metrc and utilize it, again, better for not only our needs, but your folks' needs. So excited for the conversation. I think, again, we should start with a round of introductions, and just for efficiency's sake, I can call on the squares that I see, and you can please introduce yourself, your name, who you're representing. And then after we go through that, we'll just take some housekeeping items off the list, and then get into the back and forth in the dialogue about our inventory tracking system here. So if that's cool with everybody, I'm just going to start top left-hand corner on my screen here, and we'll start with Steve.
Hi, my name is Steve Resnack. I'm the owner of Full Bloom, and we have manufacturing, cultivation, and retail licenses up in Aroostook County.
Perfect. Thank you, Steve. Ben.
Hi, my name's Ben Samuelson. My wife and I own Seed and Soil. We're in Waldo County in the town of Monroe, and we focus on producing seeds and genetics that thrive outdoors. So glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Elliot.
Hi, my name is Elliot Lee. I am representing East Coast Cannabis Company down here in Elliott, Maine. We have two manufacturing licenses, 2 retail licenses, and a cultivation license at the moment.
Rebecca O'Connor. Click, you're on mute.
Okay. Hi, I'm Rebecca O'Connor. I'm representing Sensimilla, Rugged Roots, and Coast to Coast, which is currently doing business as Rugged Roots Extracts. We've got 2 retail storefronts, the manufacturing license, and soon to be 2 cultivations.
Great, thank you. The other Rebecca.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Matz. For the sake of having another Rebecca, I go by CC. And I am here representing Stoner & Co. as the track and trace administrator.
Perfect. Carrie John.
Hi, I'm Carrie John Wilson, or KJ. I'm representing Pot and Pan. We're located in Portland, a co-located manufacturing facility. We also have a retail license in Portland that is inactive currently.
Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan Parker, representing Stoner & Co. We have a cultivation facility in Biddeford and a manufacturing facility in Biddeford.
Then Jake.
Hey, Jake Wisdom here with Blue Sky. I'm Jake Deku, representing the track and trace administrator with Blue Sky, one of the owners. And basically we have cultivation and a few manufacturers that we're looking at acting for a few locations and figure out this way to navigate all this with the inventory and being compliant and efficient. That's the whole thing that we're struggling with. You know?
Perfect. Well, welcome. Genevieve.
Hi, I'm Genevieve. I work with Wellness Connection. We have a cultivation license, 2 manufacturing licenses, and 4 retail licenses.
Perfect. Peter?
Hey, Peter Franklin here with Sweet Spot Dispensary in Portland, and we just have a retail license right now.
Hillary?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sitting in here for Highbrow. We are vertically integrated, and I am the Director of Compliance.
Zach?
How's it going? I'm Zach from Nova Farms. We have a Tier 4 outdoor cultivation in Thorndike and a retail in Greenvale Junction. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Nice to meet everyone.
Perfect. And Eddie?
Hey there, Eddie Benjamin here, representing Theory Wellness. We're vertically integrated with 3 stores, cultivation and manufacturing. I'm, for lack of better titles, I'm Theory Wellness's data guy and personally third-party certified for Metrc integration on the API. So I do just all inventory and data stuff.
Perfect. And it looks like we're only missing one. Is Allison on the call? Allison Miller? If not, we can keep an eye out and we can let her introduce herself when she does show up. So perfect. Thank you for that, everybody. Before we get going here, I want to make sure everybody's aware of our OCP team members that are on the call. Obviously, you have me, Eric Gunderson, Director of OCP. Happy to be here. We also have available if needed, John Gagnon. He's our Director of Data Analytics and helps us with our Metrc system. We have Matt Grondin, who's our Media and Stakeholder Relations Director. Lisa Roberts, our Deputy Director of Strategic Initiatives, and also on the line, Tracy Jakes, our Director of Special Projects, to help ensure that we're capturing notes. Oh, well, it looks like we might have missed some people. But those are our team members from the Office of Cannabis Policy that are going to be with us today in meetings as we move forward to help out with these conversations. Is there anybody on the call that I did not give the opportunity to introduce themselves? It looks like I may have missed somebody. If you want to come on camera, introduce yourselves, now would be the time to do it. There we go, Justice.
How you doing, everybody? I'm Justice Rhines, Chief Compliance Officer for Sweet Dirt. We're located in York, Cumberland, and Kennebec counties. We're vertically integrated adult use and medical, headquartered in Elliott. I'm also joined by my colleague, Lincoln Crutchfield, who is our primary administrator for all things Metrc and everything digital in our company.
Okay. Perfect. And looks like we have a couple more, but that's oh, there we go.
Hi, I'm Matt Judge. I'm the VP of Compliance for Theory Wellness, and I'm also our track and trace administrator for Metrc. And Eddie did a good job introducing our company, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Great.
I'll just say hi quick. Krista McIntyre with Wellness Connection of Maine, System Administrator and Accounting Manager, working with Genevieve. Thanks.
Perfect. My accounting, I think that's everybody. All right, so thank you for that. And before we get into the first agenda item, just some housekeeping stuff. First and foremost, let's make sure that we keep the dialogue here respectful. I see no reason why it wouldn't be, but it's always an important reminder as we have the dialogue that we're doing it in the most respectful manner possible. And there's a lot of differing opinions, but certainly I don't think there's going to be any issue with that, but wanted to bring it up. I've already let the group know that we're live streaming, and you'll be able to see this video archived on our YouTube page, just awareness for this group. And then when we get into the dialogue and the back and forth, certainly try to use the raised hand feature. I think we have 19 members or 19 different individuals that are going to be on this call as track and trace administrators or users, people that can share their expertise, their knowledge. I think initially our plan was to have about 10, but we had so many good people apply for it. We said we just open it up to make sure that we got everybody's feedback. So with a lot of people, logistically and having the back and forth can sometimes be difficult, but if you want to make a comment or interject or ask a question or share an experience, let's try to use the raise hand feature. And then finally, if you're not talking, if we can keep ourselves on mute, that would be helpful with limiting background noise. So with that, I think we can get into the very first agenda topic. And really, I think this is an opportunity for this group to share kind of 30,000-foot view of our inventory tracking system Metrc. Really an opportunity for you to share with us comments, concerns, ideas that you have to make the system a little bit better from your perspective and possibly from our perspective as well. And then moving forward in our next meeting, we can start to get more granular by singling out certain topics, issues that arise in this call. So if everybody's cool with that, that's kind of where we can start with a general sharing session. Again, thoughts, comments, concerns. After that, we want to allot some time just to get some feedback and some questions that we're going to have for you around batch tracking, as we want to implement that as quickly as possible, just to make sure that when we do it, that we're doing it right. And then we'll do a round robin, a final question, and then see if we have some consensus around some agenda items for our next meeting. But nod ahead. Does that sound like a good plan for everybody? Sweet. So again, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Just in general, does anybody want to be the first to share some existing challenges that they're having with the system, whether it be at cultivation, manufacturing, how we integrate with testing, retail, really whatever it may be? Now's the time to break the ice and be the first one to go here. Again, we're in listening mode here, so we can take it back in house and hopefully move forward with recommendations for how we can make the system better for everybody.
I think I can start it off with one of the more global issues that we're seeing, particularly with interface with third-party programs and software that we use, enterprise resource programs. The API quality and development doesn't seem to be meeting the standard that Metrc is supposed to be employed to preserve. We're supposed to be preventing diversion. We're supposed to be, tracking products so that we can recall them and minimize risk if there's a products recall event, things like that. So those are pretty grave situations. We just don't feel that the API quality and development meets that criteria, as evidenced by a litany of issues that we've had. I don't know, Lincoln, if you want to talk about more specifics there that you're seeing.
Yeah, just add to that, and I'm sure folks see the same thing. One of the challenges we see pretty often is trying to automate our business processes to the extent possible, trying to make things faster for our teams. There's obviously compliance and regulation is a burden on business, and one we're willing to bear and we believe in. But trying to make that as efficient as possible is something we're always looking to do. A great example of that is the API endpoints don't really support, and the CSV uploads don't support this either, an automation of transfer manifest creation. So, if you CSV upload a Metrc manifest, you can add all your packages on there, but you still have to go in and key every single individual package weight onto that package. We know that information. We've calculated that information. Why should we not be able to upload that into CSV and just do a sign off and say it's accurate? That same functionality is not exposed in the Metrc API endpoint. And I don't know that there's any provider out there who's figured out a way to automate that process from a third-party standpoint either. That's just an example. Those similar challenges we see trying to integrate business processes with Metrc across the board.
No, that's helpful. And I will point out the examples are helpful for me. I'm certainly not a power user of the Metrc system. Luckily, we have people that are much more technically advanced that are off camera right now. but yeah, for helping us for understand, again, the overlap with interacting with the system in your business operations, those concrete examples will help at least me and others, I'm sure, kind of visualize pathways forward. So yeah, that was helpful. Elliot.
Yeah, I mean, kind of jumping in there, one of the things that we noticed when we first got into Metrc and started working on it, and now this was a while ago at this point, but there was just the new business training, which included 5 questions, which was like your name, your IIC number were 2 of those 5. And it didn't really provide an incredible training. And I know we've gotten more training as that went on. But one of the things that we ran into was we made items wrong. You know, we did not create, say, wet flour, for instance, was put as buds flour. And now we're being taxed at a buds flour rate instead of a wet flour rate. But I can't go back and fix that item because I assigned it inventory. It's a cancerous item that sits in my inventory waiting for someone to misclick it because we can't get rid of it. And we also can't change it. It's just sitting there as an incorrect item forever at this point. And that was one thing that we really noticed out of the gate was we didn't get a sandbox to play with. We didn't really get great training to play with. We were kind of playing with, in essence, like live ammo. And now we have a few products sitting in our inventory that just aren't right. And it's hard to get to that. I think, you know, kind of also jumping on what you heard from Justice there was we also, you know, there's the tedious clicking that is wildly unnecessary. I don't know why I can't set my homepage to automatically extend to 500. Why can't I set my homepage to automatically filter in what I'm looking for, be it the lab, be it my edibles manufacturing, be it if I'm just looking for packages and stuff, some way to try to help us navigate this with its repetitive, tedious clicking and adding and data entry that it knows. I mean, I don't know why I have to click every test for a flour test. If you know I'm testing flour, why isn't there a preset flour? That one. You know I'm making an edible, whether it's a tincture or a hard one. You know what should be on there. We all know. You should just have a button to click. So I just feel like there's a number of places like that, you know, we have a lot written down here to help try to streamline that. And it's just, those are some of the 30,000 foot problems that we've noticed as we've begun that process.
So just so I'm clear, and I'm sure you have them all written down, and I'm sure we'll get to them or have the opportunity to discuss some more of them. Just start to finish, certain levels of automation in the tasks that you need to do in interacting with the system just to make your lives easier as the track and trace administrator.
Exactly. There are a lot of unnecessary clicks that the system should know as to what we're doing that could really streamline that process and allow us to operate much more effectively with the system because we don't have to just keep repetitively hitting 500, selecting all of the tests. Oh, we didn't pick the right test. Go back to the manifest, pull it off, change the LTD, put it back on the manifest, send it back out. When in reality, it could have just been a button that we didn't have to think about.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you bring up too, because I know a lot of what we see on this side are, well, I don't know if a lot, but we certainly see it. It seems like at least on a monthly basis of wrong tests being clicked and helping avoid that headache for our users for sure. And Elliot, knowing you, I'm assuming you have some of these examples, more of these examples written down as well.
Yeah, I got a whole page for you if you want me to email it to you.
Okay, good. I would imagine at some point in a following meeting, maybe we could have a discussion around those touch points and how to automate them. So getting a better sense of some of those examples would probably be helpful on our end. So I might ask you for that page at some point.
It's all yours, Eric. Just let me know when.
Perfect. All right. I got Ben, then Jake, then Peter.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for the floor. I just want to start by kind of tipping a cap to what's happening right now, which is I'm feeling really seen. I think it's really special that we're having this meeting that in this public-private partnership between the OCP and Metrc, the feedback from us as stakeholders is getting fed into a system where the public side can do its purpose, which is to hold this private entity accountable to the needs of us. And Metrc leveraging its resources to provide a valuable service and keep everybody safe and be usable by us is, I also know what they want to do. My one issue that's been I might not understand the facts, but it's my understanding that as a cultivator, we can sell, like now the statute or the rule has changed to the point where we can release batches of extractable material to manufacturings without mandatory testing requirements. But the only thing holding us back is functionality in Metrc. And that has already caused us damages. I mean, you know, paying for unnecessary testing. It seems like an extremely easy fix, and it wasn't a surprise. So for Metrc to not have something launch ready when that rule goes in, oh, Eric, I see you. I might not understand, but that's I'm feeling that one.
Yeah, and I can maybe have Director Gagnon come on, but I think I understand what you're saying. With the new testing requirements that were passed to the legislature, we have gone through the rulemaking process, and I hope everybody had a chance to read those and contribute towards that. But those actually don't go into effect until the rule goes into effect, and at which point we will be able to have the configurations up and running for those new testing requirements. So hopefully that will be seamless as soon as those rules go into effect, and we're able to adjust to that new testing regime.
Gotcha. That makes me feel better. I thought it was like ready, but okay. Yeah, thanks for this session. And I would also say, here's another issue on our farm. So we're a cultivation and a nursery, and we focus on breeding. We breed with very large populations, and we also deal with pollen. So we are moving plants. Like our nursery facility has a little bit more in the way of amenities for dealing with some of our, like, for example, seed cleaning. Now, if I wanted to clean all of my seed at my nursery license, I would have to pay like, you know, thousands of dollars in excise tax just to bring a bunch of flour, which is essentially trash. And this, actually, I'm sorry, this isn't a Metrc thing, actually. So I'll cut myself off.
No,
but on the Metrc side of it, actually, it's really hard for me once a plant is not a seedling to bring it into a tagged phase and then make it back into packages for retail sale. So there's something that needs to happen on that end, but I think we're the only people with that problem.
And for the non-Metrc item, Ben, happy to talk offline about that to get a better understanding and see if there's something that we can't do. But yeah, for sure, Metrc working group. So try to keep it centered around Metrc. Thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
Jake, or Jake and Jake.
Yeah, so I mean, if we're just talking about basic stuff here, just the main supplemental guide, if you actually try to follow a few pages in there, it's not tailored to the way Metrc works for the state of Maine. So there's a lot of corrections in there just for the beginner starting out. You know, actually having a guide that you can follow that works is critical. Just updating that is definitely a must-have for your whole community.
Yeah, and almost just kind of going back to the starting block and just kind of, you know, working with like training people from the ground up, because a lot of it is not super intuitive. And yeah, it just could be we could have a better training guide essentially. But also one thing that has definitely affected us talking about testing was that I think a lot of those check boxes sound like they're specific to Maine to some extent, which is like with working with any integrated softwares, essentially none of them have the option to check those boxes when we're sending a test result. So we essentially have to bypass the software that we're working it with, go to Metrc, send the test result, and then go back to the working software and like bypass the state system to adjust that package down to the right size now that a test has been sent out. And that seems like it's all kind of based around those checkboxes as well.
Okay. There was a lot of nodding when you just said that. Can you help me understand? So you're talking about your own industry side inventory management solution integrating with the state side's Metrc, and there being gaps where you're jumping around. So yeah, there's more and more not.
Especially even in that just that testing phase right there, like those check boxes that we have to check for each different product.
You're doing directly in Metrc.
Yes, and because those are no software that I've spoken with has the ability to do those, because apparently Maine is the only state where like those check boxes are there. is what I've been told, which sounds crazy, but I guess, yeah, those check boxes are possibly already automated in other states, is what it sounds like. So that when it knows what product it is, it knows what test it has to be.
Yeah. Is there other examples as you move through the system where you're jumping from your tool to Metrc? Okay, more nods.
Yeah, we don't see them as often. Like that one is just huge just because we're a lab. So we're sending things off for testing constantly.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is probably one of the biggest ones that we see.
So
we'll push the floor to other people to let you know, let them get a word in on what their issues are too.
yeah, so I have Peter, Genevieve, and then Rebecca, and then also Rebecca, I'm sorry you shake your head to that question. If you could answer those other examples, that would be great. And then Ryan, I also saw big nods from you. That's an interesting piece, but we'll go to Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of reiterate the lack of training that is involved with Metrc. It's just, you know, if you're coming into this system and have no real idea what's going on with Metrc, you get access to it. Once you get your license, you get product, and you have no idea, you know, what to do with it, what to do with Metrc, how to accept it. You kind of have to learn from the people who's making that first delivery. And that's really difficult. You know, where do you sign? How do you accept it? What room do you put in? What does that even mean? You just don't get that with any of the training that I've seen, at least. And I'm only on the retail side, so I don't have all the other issues that I'm sure everyone else has. But for retail side of things, it is very difficult to, you know, just understand kind of the basics of how Metrc works in that first week of opening and getting a license. And then, you know, it's all the stress of, am I doing it right? And there's nothing to kind of fall back on. You know, if Metrc had a, you know, a platform before actually giving you full access that you could mess around with and make adjustments and do whatever and see how it kind of affects your inventory, that'd be phenomenal in a way, just so that you're not, you know, making this permanent record of something before you even get access or understand how it works. So I would say, you know, the training is really just would be so much more helpful if there was, you know, more videos, if there's more guides, if there's anything more, you know, for a company that's across the United States pretty much at this point, to not have a full training is kind of crazy.
And you kind of answer what was going to be my follow-up question, because this has been repeated a few times as far as training or initially getting onto the system. I mean, what venues or what media are like, what's the best way to get those trainings in your hands, Peter? Video being one. I'm thinking like, would in-person trainings or more guidance from our office, or just gonna help me think through that?
You know, ideally it'd be like a one-on-one training with someone to go through kind of all of the key usage and how to use Metrc properly the first time. You know, I'm sure we've made plenty of mistakes in our time with trying to figure it out. And there's no real support there. You know, if you use any point of sale system, anything else, they have hundreds of clients as well, but they still have dedicated people who can help you out. And, you know, we don't get any of that. You know, you contact support and they'll call you back in a day, a couple hours, you know, at the very earliest. And by then, you know, you kind of need things to be moving much quicker. So there's no real help from Metrc side of things on how to kind of move things around and not make mistakes, really.
Thank you. Genevieve.
So I kind of agree with everything that we've heard already, but like our biggest thing is having to manually do things because the API just breaks so easily. So we have several people that do data entry throughout the day, and the more people that you have doing it and the more times they have to do it in different systems, the more risk of messing up and having mistakes. And that's been a really big issue. And like the test samples, you know, we have to manually go in. Like our system, our third-party system is set up so that you can submit samples through it, but it doesn't actually check the boxes. So that's been an issue time and time again. So we have to shut off the integration and do it manually. It's just, that's the biggest struggle with Metrc. And I think there's a lot of interpretation to how you can use it too, because Metrc, there was no training, and different laws in different states makes it so Metrc can't set it up specifically. So like, we need to know how the state wants us to use this, how they imagine us using this and stuff, because buying wholesale, we see that other distributors and stuff are using it much differently than we are. And it might have to do with size also, you know, if you don't have as much product.
Okay, so you're saying when you interact with other licensees, the way that they're interacting with the system is different than the way that you may be interacting with the system or utilizing it, or just the functionality? Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, so like, we do a lot of like batch sizes. We have a standard batch size for things when we send them out, because we count everything every day. So it makes it easier. So if you go in and count, you know, 50 bags of 15, it's easier to make sure your inventory is accurate. But other people, smaller places, I think when they are just making an order for a specific license, they just put it all in one big lot. So like, it just doesn't, it's not always going to line up between different companies. Different companies are going to do different things, but everybody went in blind, not knowing what the state expected to see in Metrc.
Got it. Thank you for that. Rebecca, Steve, and then Hillary.
Yeah, so just to loop back on the API and the disconnects there, we experienced one with testing where we, in our, our third-party software, we entered a submission for testing. There were no boxes to select. That ended up being pushed through to Metrc as that package submitted for testing. But once it got to the lab, they had no idea what to test it for. That ended up becoming a support ticket with Metrc, where we had to let them know what tests we needed assigned to that one. It was a whole ordeal. It took longer to get our testing back because of it. Another point, we've had so many integration issues that we actually are disconnected and doing the double entry from our system and Metrc. It's just honestly seemed easier that way. And the only thing stopping us right now from not just using Metrc is having a print solution, being able to print off our tags and labels for all of our packages. With all of the demos that we've done with other ERPs, seed to sales, all of that, manifest is another area that they've told us. Metrc specifically won't like flip on the controls for an API. So those are things, testing, manifest. There was another one, but I can't remember it right now. Those are things that we just will never be able to do with an API, it seems like. That's all I've got.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, I was writing notes. Thank you. Steve, Hillary, Eddie, and then I have a question that I want to go back to ask Genevieve that I didn't ask. So Genevieve, after Eddie, I'll probably call on you. Steve, floor is yours.
Okay, so the API integration, basically ditto to what everyone said, that needs to be bolstered quite a bit. The testing buttons, if they had something that was more generic, like edible testing, flower testing, oil testing, and those things were just preloaded, and also too, you need to keep the ability to modify those, because let's say for edibles, you might have a batch that tests low or tests high, and you retest that batch. You need to be able to go in. You don't need to do all of that gamut of tests again, because you're paying for all of those different tests, right? So if you only need to retest potency, you don't need all those other things. So if you just had some kind of option where you could still go in and pick them if needed, that might be beneficial. As far as the training thing goes, I agree, there needs to be a little bit more. Metrc, like many other softwares, it's easier to learn while you're doing it. But if you're live and you're doing it and you're messing up, you're creating problems, right? So maybe they need to think about some kind of like wizard or something that you can turn on while you're using it to kind of lead the road for you on where to go while you're in there actively using the system, right? And once you do it enough, you're not going to need that anymore because you would have learned how to do it, right? So it's something you can turn on and off. You don't have to look at it every time, you know? And another thing I would just like to say, they need to turn off those yellow payment boxes on the first 4 or 5 days of every month, because they're pulling their payments and they're not coming out the first of every month, and they're leaving that stupid box on the top of the screen for us to click and get rid of. So if they can get rid of that, that would be great. And that's all I've got for right now.
Yeah. All right. Can you go back and help me understand? This is the first I've heard about yellow payment boxes that are coming. Can you just hold my hand and walk me through what that is and what the solution is?
So Metrc pulls out of your account for payments on each license you have on the first of the month, midnight on the first. Now, most banks don't clear payments right away on debit or credit cards, right? So it's kind of pending in your account. Well, on the top of every screen that you open, whether you switch from packages to transfers to, you know, employees, whatever tab you're going to on that particular license, that thing pops up in your face until the payment actually clears in Metrc itself. You know, like we don't need to know that the payment's, you know, waiting. You know what I mean? So it's basically, it comes up on the top of the screen and it's kind of annoying.
Got it.
So that's all I got for now.
Perfect. All right, let's go to Hillary, Eddie, and then again, the question for Genevieve, and I'll got a couple more questions too, but Hillary.
An example that might be going back to that API key, we've had a couple times here where we have receiving unaffiliated wholesale transfers, and I can see right in the manifest that it did all the line items have passed testing, although when I go to drop it down prior to receiving it, there is no data for us to see. So we can see that it has passed testing, but when trying to check to make sure that we have the correct variances labeled on the actual marketing label for each unit, there is no way to see what that is prior to accepting. So we'll have to accept and then go back into packages to see what those individual testing results were to make sure that it is properly demonstrated on the packaging.
So what's the solution to that? You just want to be able to see?
I'm not sure if it's an API issue or because it happens randomly, but it'll be before receiving it. When you go and drop down on the manifest there, it'll show you each line item and then it'll show either history or lab results. Yep. We've had times where it will have nothing to show for lab results, although with that manifest, it will say to the right-hand side there that it did pass testing.
Got it. All right. Eddie.
Hey there. I first want to just +1 on opening up the API for transfers. That's been a very long and frustrating process to have to do basically everything else in a third party that integrates, but have the transfers, you know, still being done manually in Metrc. I did want to speak generally to like kind of all of the issues in the unique relationship that exists between Metrc, the state, and the end users, where the end users aren't the customers of Metrc. The state is the customer. And any time that you contact Metrc with, you know, either a software deficiency or a request for an improvement, many of which, you know, have been mentioned today, and I'm sure get mentioned all the time across all the operators across the state, Metrc's response is typically, the state is our customer. The state has to request these things. Like, you know, thanks, but we're, you know, you basically, this is falling on deaf ears because you're not our customer. Which is why, you know, a work group like this is so fabulous and this is like so much appreciated. And I guess this is the point to overcome that specific issue. But it would be, it's frustrating to hear that because, you know, in a sense, we are the customers. Even if we're not, you know, if we didn't originally sign up, we are certainly the end users, and we think the end users should have some sort of direct feedback with the company. In any other support or software or support system, you don't have that intermediary that is the customer but not the end user of Metrc. And I know the state uses Metrc and, you know, for their own end goals, but it would be really nice to, you know, in addition to these meetings, to have some sort of forum or some way to send a request to the state to request of Metrc And I think these meetings are a really good first step, but it is a weird relationship that I think needs a little bit more communication, or like a forum or a message board where you can upvote or downvote certain issues that people are having in Metrc, that the state could say, Metrc, can you please do those? Look at all these people requesting, those improvements. The other thing I wanted to mention was the real lack or the deficiencies in standard reporting that comes out of Metrc. And that's one of those things where if you bring that up to Metrc, they'll say, yeah, well, you're not our customer, so we're not going to do anything about it. The state would have to request it. I mean, if you download like a current inventory report from Metrc, from the stock reporting, it doesn't even have the quantities. I mean, there are some very basic things that are needed in the Metrc stock reporting. I don't know anyone who actually uses that Metrc stock reporting because it is so terrible. But I think it would be really beneficial if you aren't using any sort of third-party integration with Metrc. If you wanted to just use Metrc and pull reporting out of it, right now you really aren't able to do so to pull anything meaningful.
No, thank you, Eddie. I think to your first point, I'm hoping, this working group will help alleviate some of those concerns that you have and some of the issues that we've been seeing. I probably should have shared at the beginning of this session, but the idea is to have this meeting 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it takes in order to have like some comprehensive recommendations that we can move forward with, again, in a partnership with us, the state, industry, and Metrc, that we can make those changes. But the point that you brought up that I find interesting that I hadn't considered is that continued flow of communication, feedback, comments, concerns, even outside of this working group, because obviously this working group is not just going to exist in perpetuity, but making sure that we're continuing to have that dialogue. And I certainly think that's something that's worth fleshing out in future meetings too, because I'm sure if that's something that we can do on the state side and we're in control of it, I definitely think it's worth having that conversation. That's a really interesting point.
Yep. And in addition, for all the other operators who aren't on this call, I'm sure there's a lot of operators out there with suggestions for improvement and enhancements and issues that come up that are getting that same response, which is the state's the customer. And we just want to make sure that they have an outlet for their, concerns or improvements to be heard too.
Right. So we got Elliot and then Justice, but before I want to go back to Genevieve, and I'm sure anybody can answer this question. This is like very Eric's beginner IT brain type of question, but I think you said in particular when the IP breaks. When you say that, or when anybody says that when the IP breaks, is that simply just another way of describing the gaps when you're jumping from one system to the other, or is there like something that actually crashes that is making your life miserable?
So when our API breaks, so like for instance, in our third-party system, when we go to convert something, if we do not click yes to assign a new Metrc tag, it keeps moving forward in our system, but it stays back where it started at in Metrc. So we have to go in and manually do it in Metrc to make both systems match.
Got it.
We also we had to build a sheet to do a daily reconciliation to make sure that both of our systems match. So we have to run reports from Metrc every day, and we have to paste them into these sheets that we've created to make sure everything matches, because sometimes the integration stops working and we don't realize it, and we've moved forward.
So there are a lot of nods. Does everybody on this call have a kind of a similar process for reconciliation between the two? Okay.
And then we've noticed also just like actual errors with like doing large batches of things. So like converting a large amount of plants over to flowering phase, it will just like error out on you. And you'll actually have to just like go and do it in small groups.
It can only load so many items.
Which is like, it just takes forever to have to do it in small groups when you could just select them all and do it at once.
So when the two systems, I don't know if anybody can answer this, or Elliot can answer it because he's next, but when your two systems don't match and there's that reconciliation that's needed, whether it's with your system or Metrc, I'm assuming if it's your system, you can just go in and change it to help get everything where it needs to be. With Metrc, is that then become a touch point with Metrc support? Yeah, nods.
Yeah.
Okay. Elliot.
Yeah, so just to kind of touch on that for a second, when it does break and your API is no longer talking to Metrc, you have to go in there, and sometimes, as was stated before, your system has moved on, and now I'm going back to try to fix something. That is a call to Metrc. That is a new ticket number. Everything that we just worked on now is in a full pause until we've resolved that issue. And you may not even realize that that's broken. And you have to break it so many times before you're like, oh, we have a gap here. It won't close out my items. It won't finish the package because I have to enter a number in there. And once I enter the 0, then Metric's good, but the API just cannot get it to talk to that. So there's so many little parts, from transfer manifests to closing out packages to, if you're on the retail end, the retail sales at the end of each day, having to go in and click on every single one and approve them as, yes, that was good, because the API can't do it. That's some of it. I did want to go back to talk about the testing stuff real quick with what, Steve had said with, just clicking a potency for edibles if they didn't pass and you only wanted to do that one. And the state has actually even come through and said, if you want to retest an edible, it has to be 2 packages, 2 full panel tests. So, even without that added in there, I still think the state could put those automated tests in there. If we have to do full panel, tests anyway, and we can't individually select tests, that would actually be something that helps that compliance, because we're not clicking individual tests, we're clicking full panels, which is what the state wants. The other one that I wanted to talk about was when you're doing an unaffiliated wholesale transfer and you have items coming in, you do get test results, you get a lot of info, but one of the things the state wants to know is the harvest date, and you don't get that. You don't get certain information that you need. I have to make an assessment. I look at when it was tested. Well, 2 weeks before that, it was probably harvested and starting to cure. So it's got to be in that ballpark. But you don't get a full history of the plant and of that batch, which is wildly helpful. I mean, I don't need all of the information. I don't need to know the mother plant it came off of, but I do need certain break points of information, more so than just what its potency and moisture content is. And I feel like that is a massive disconnect that Metrc isn't providing to us. And, we're on the hook for telling the state, when was this harvested? Unless I ask the person I bought it off of, when did you harvest this exact batch? It's sort of hard to get that answer. And one last one with the Metrc stock reporting, when I pull a lot of that into an Excel spreadsheet, they put pounds in there. They don't keep it as numerical values. So I can't even go in there and use, if I'm attempting to use it, I have to go in there and manually take out the pounds, take out the letters, take out the words, because data is really all that Excel cares about. And they give you a PDF in Excel. They don't, offer it in a more usable manner. So let alone the fact that the reports are garbage, the ones that they give you have to go through and edit them so much that it just makes it so many touch points to even get something that could be considered useful on that reporting. So those are just a few things that we had talked about that I wanted to touch on.
No, yeah, that's helpful. And a question for you. So you're talking about the unaffiliated wholesale transfers and the information that's provided within the system that's going to be helpful to you. And you said harvest date would be one of them.
Right.
I'm assuming there's more information that's not proprietary that could be included in that exchange. Yeah, more nods. I like, okay.
Yeah.
Is that something where, are we talking about like 2 or 3 pieces of information? Are we talking about 20 different data points? Is that something this group or maybe a subgroup could come up with a list of, just so we can understand what information would be helpful to be part of that transfer or not? Yeah. Okay.
I think it's close to 2 to 3 pieces of information. We don't need the world, but I do need the stuff that makes it so that these items are compliant. Unless you get very detailed in what you're doing and calling the customers who you're buying it from, there's several pieces of information, but I only think it's like 3 to 5 maybe. I don't think it's necessary. I have a few written down. There might be more that I didn't consider, but yeah, I don't think it's 20 pieces of information.
Okay. I got harvest date. Do you have the other ones? And Hillary, I see here in the bottom of my screen nodding. Do you have other just or do you, I don't want to put you on the spot either, Elliot.
Yeah, no, we do. So another one that we could use also is when we're pulling off our batches, you typically have to go through your test results, and you can look through about how many times things have been sent off, whether it was remediated or not. And it'll come up as like a giant red, like, hey, the whatever didn't pass, like the, moisture content was too high. It didn't pass on this one. And sometimes when you're going through there, you don't recognize it. They're buried deep within there. So if you could be getting a piece of information that says, the bullet points of this didn't pass, this did pass, this was okay, this was remediated, that's good to know, because sometimes, unless you have a fine tooth comb, if you look at the first page of test results, it's like, hey, it's here, it must be good. You can completely miss that. And the last one is the time that it is chilling, and it's from the harvested phase into its package phase, because a lot of what we're basing this on is when it was sent off for testing. So knowing, for instance, how long it has been around and what its history is would also be monumentally important. Knowing that it was harvested back in April, but it may not have been tested until November because it just sat there. So now I'm guesstimating when this thing came down. So its lineage would be helpful, because I only get from its test time. I don't get its previous life, where it was and what was going on with it. I think just a few of those would be really helpful. So it's remediation, harvest date, and then lineage of its time in. Yeah.
Gotcha. It's incredibly helpful. All right. So we've got a bunch of hands up. Justice, Rebecca, Genevieve, Ben, Steve, Lincoln. So Justice, fire away.
I just wanted to sort of dovetail on what Eddie was speaking about as well. There are certain things that about the system that can help, drive satisfaction with the system, drive adoption, and minimize the amount that you have to hear about the system. And for an example of that for us is, every plant tag, every package tag has an RFID transmitter in it, a chip in it. We are able to purchase scanners on the third-party scanners on the market, but Metrc won't give us the ability to look at our instance. If we can be provided with tools, if Metrc can say, okay, yes, you have these licenses, we can give you scanners that will allow you to do inventory, take inventory scans, and interface directly with your system. Things like that are really going to drive adoption. Things like that are really, because that you're telling somebody, yes, you have to do this, but we're also going to give you the tools to drive down the red labor and resources that you have to do it. So I've been asking Metrc, I think, for 2 years now, to give us that capability, and it's not a priority for them. We're not the customer, and the last I got was, well, the only way we can do that is to open it up and give you access to the entire state information. So, being mentioned. Yeah, and our third parties, for that matter, with the sandbox portion. I'm getting a note from Lincoln on the side. Sorry, the sandbox is not available to our integrating software providers either. So anything that they do, a new program coming into the state to integrate, is going to go through the same things where it's all trial and error, but those errors are being recorded. And that's a situation that we find ourselves in. We're the first ones to integrate in the state with our provider, and it's always a process where something will break, we fix that, something else breaks, we fix that, and it's a shell game. And meanwhile, a lot of the times we're risking dropping out of compliance as direct result of these issues. So long story short, we would just love some advocacy to give us some more tools to drive down the labor intensity.
Yeah, for sure. Rebecca, Genevieve, Ben, Ryan, and that looks like Lincoln no longer has a stand up. But real quick, just a show of hands, like actual hands, not Zoom hands, just so I have a better understanding, and my team over here. Raise your hand. It would probably be better if I do it reversed. If you don't use a third-party solution, is anybody on here? Just Ben, Steve, right? Okay, perfect. All right, Rebecca.
Hi, yeah, so I just wanted to circle back. One API issue that we did end up seeing, and it was a big part of what sparked us not being integrated anymore. We retired a plant in our third party. A completely separate plant got retired in Metrc, and we didn't realize that that even happened until we went back to our system and tried to retire that plant correctly. So the first plant was still existing. The second plant was like pre-retired. And that became a whole confusing ticket with Metrc because they had no idea why the first one was retired in anyways. It was retired at like 3:30, and then like 4:50-ish, we went back in to retire the correct plant, and it was already gone. So we've seen some very interesting stuff with the integrations. Also, I would like to say, circle back on what I believe Hillary mentioned about seeing the testing before you accept a transfer. I didn't even realize we haven't accepted transfers. We're a cultivation, so we, mostly are sending out things. And we've gotten a couple people who have wanted to return product based off of the test results that they then saw. And really, it would just be a lot easier if they were able to see that before accepting it and just reject the package and send it right back. Something that I've noticed with sending out a package and then getting it sent back after they've accepted it. One time that happened, and we got the guidance that that product is then supposed to be destroyed. So if we just get it returned, we can then put it back on our inventory versus getting it back and just having to, grind it up and mix it with some dirt and throw it away. It's a little bit upsetting.
No, thank you for that. That's helpful. Genevieve.
So one of the things that I noticed that happens in Metrc is when you finish a package and there's nothing left in it, it stays active. So when you're pulling reports from Metrc, it'll show up in the reporting. You have to manually go in and you have to finish the packages so that they move over to the inactive tab and don't show in reporting anymore. And also, I don't know if it'll work for anybody else. We've found that their CSV reports work better than their Excel or PDFs. Just in case you want to try. And some of the things that I think we like to see when we order things from another vendor for wholesale is just any compliance information. So if we purchase finished goods that already have labels on them with all the compliance information, that's great. But if we buy bulk items and we're going to package them ourselves, we need to know all that compliance information so we can make sure it's on our labeling. So like the tested batch, the parent lot, all of that information that we need for compliance.
So two questions for that last point. So that's just a manual process. You need to go back to the individual or the group that you're working with to get that information to make sure that you have compliant packaging. Okay, I got that. And then when you say you have to go back and finish product, so is that just simply you going into the system and clicking a button, finish product, or is there like small amounts that are left in packages that are making it difficult for you to get rid of, even though in reality it might be gone? Sorry.
No, it's just once the package is completely empty, we have to go in and click that item and hit finish package manually in Metrc.
So would that example then fall into, we'll kind of recap here in a little bit, but I'm kind of creating buckets. Would that fall into basically the automation bucket? So when you zero it out, it just goes away without the additional step of clicking or finishing on a package?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then sometimes in our third party, we combine packages. So if we make an error and we convert something wrong, we'll combine it back together with its bulk lot and start over to make sure. So like if we assign the wrong item name or something, sometimes that will break our integration. So instead of consuming all 50 grams, it only consumed 5 for whatever reason in Metrc, but in our third party, it'll consume everything and put it back in that package. And another thing that would be helpful is when something fails testing and we decide to remediate it, like when we transfer it to the manufacturing license from cultivation, like if it automatically carried that remediation symbol instead of having to go in and manually remediate it in Metrc. So currently, if something fails, you have to go in and you have to click the package and hit remediate and fill out all the steps and everything.
Okay. All right, let's go to Ben and then Ryan, and then I have a couple questions, just clarifying questions.
Cool. I think I have a clarifying question. I can tell that APIs are going to be a big part of this whole process and conversation. What exactly is an API? I know that it's the third-party software or like something that allows the third party to touch and make changes in Metrc, but like so I do a ton of CSV uploads. That's the only way that we could possibly function at all, is that I like happen to have gone to grad school and I'm really good at spreadsheets. But like if I'm looking at my my peers on the medical side and they were suddenly thrust into this arena of Metrc, and the only way to efficiently harvest 100 plants is through an API, they're gonna throw their hands up, so I would like to first, if somebody can just tell me, I don't know, give me a primer on what an API is. I'll open the floor to that. Maybe you could just clarify, because I just feel murky on it.
Yeah, so it's essentially the handshake or exchange between the two systems, but I think this is a perfect opportunity for me to introduce our Director of Data Analytics, John Gagnon, who would be able to much more eloquently answer this question than I could.
Hi, folks. Hope you're having a good afternoon. Eric, can you mute that? Okay. Yeah, so I'll give you the short version. API stands for Application Programming Interface. And Eric had it right. At a high level, it's just a handshake between a third-party piece of software and the Metrc system. And I can acknowledge a lot of what you've been saying, that Metrc does not publish every possible thing that you can do in Metrc in their API. I do want to make a distinction between APIs and the CSVs that were just mentioned. So CSV uploads, things like that, that's actually technically not part of the API. I think in general, when we're talking about APIs, we're talking about third-party software vendors. I don't want to name any in particular, who use software calls over the internet to exchange data. So this takes a lot of different forms. Certainly there's some that are tailored just, for example, for the customer experience in a retail location. It might be something completely different on a cultivation side. It might be something closer to an ERP system. And typically those third-party vendors, they not only attempt to meet the state's regulatory requirements when it comes to Metrc, but they also frequently provide extra value-added services to licensees that don't have to deal directly with Metrc. And it's very helpful to hear your experience here. I'm surprised how much APIs have come up. So I've learned something new today, that it is an issue out there, and we'll certainly be talking about it more. Just so everyone's understands some of the challenges. So in Maine, before anyone can become a third-party vendor to use this API in Metrc, they have to go through a validation process. And as of this morning, Maine has 105 different independent software companies that have at least started that process. Not all of them have completed it. And as a matter of fact, I had another one come in today. If you look at states like California, you're talking about more than 200 vendors who have done that process. So we'll definitely have some internal conversations. I think that there's, I hear you about the pain points for things like transfers needing to be able to jump into Metrc out of your host system. That's certainly a conversation that we can have with a vendor. But do realize that it would be a little bit challenging for OCP or any state agency to work directly with 100+ third-party vendors. But these are good points. If there's any follow-up question on APIs, I'd be happy to talk about it for the next 3 hours. I love this stuff.
Yeah,
I'll save everybody that. Perfect. Thank you, John. We got,
now that
did you have more that you wanted to go before? Okay, cool. Fire away.
Now that I kind of have that clarification, yeah, my input would be that I think that refining and like massaging out some of the friction between APIs and actually what appears in Metrc, like, is far from enough for, certainly wouldn't be enough for me. Like, I want to see just a lot more smooth ability to just put data from a spreadsheet into Metrc. And I think that that's going to be important for a lot of operators that want to kind of stay small, because letting a third party make an unusable software more usable is just not a solution. So that's what I have to say about that.
Do the other straight Metrc users, the non-third party users, agree with that as far as, okay, Rebecca, yeah. It's helpful. Ryan.
Yeah, I just want to touch on that as well. I think it just speaks volumes to the fact that most of the people here are using a third-party software. You know, I understand for larger organizations where they're moving stuff from license to license, it's almost necessary for them to use such a thing. For us, having mainly just cultivation, and with the current headaches that we've dealt with these programs, it was just easier to cut our integration. And we're finding it to be, yes, the reporting is not as great, but a lot of the basic moves that we have to do in cultivation seem to be rather easy, compared to having to go in and out of the functionality of the program itself. That being said, maybe Benjamin with the nursery license could probably talk about this more, but you know, when we're bringing in new genetics or new seeds, we're having some issues with just keeping stuff organized as far as, you know, in a typical pheno hunt as a cultivator would do. You know, we're whittling down strains, but those strains are just kind of stuck there. And so we're giving them numbers to represent the seeds that they were popped from, but then there's really no way to go back and change that once we've established this is the winner that we want to keep running. So maybe someone else can speak to this a little bit more, but other than that, yeah, just happy to be there, happy this thing is going on, and excited to see where it goes. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Elliot, then I got a clarifying question, then I kind of want to try to recap what I'm hearing to make sure that we're all on the same page and potentially inform like the last 10 minutes of this meeting as we put together agenda items for next meeting. But Elliot.
I just wanted to jump on what Ryan was saying there is the exact same thing that you deal with when you're learning Metrc. If you make an item wrong, we cannot delete it. So if you're going on a pheno hunt and I've assigned something inventory, it's there, it's with us. It's just here at the party now. And that is very difficult to navigate around because on a pheno hunt, for example, yeah, we had 90 different strains in here and we're keeping 5 of them, but that means 85 are floating around in here forever. I could make 100 different types of chocolates and only 2 of them survive. And now the other ones are all chilling in there. I may make a plant wrong. I may make a tag wrong. We may have somebody click just the wrong button, put the wrong category. And that item is now existing here forever. So it's much more than just something you see in strain variety. You see it in items in a manufacturing for a kitchen. You see it in concentrates for a lab. Anytime you have an opportunity to create a new item is an opportunity to do it wrong. And then it's forever there once you have allocated inventory to it. We just can't change it and we can't delete it. So I don't need to be able to delete it as long as I'm able to change it. Can I fix my category? Can I change it? Can I update it? Or allow me the ability to kill it and get rid of it so it's not randomly selected by somebody just accidentally.
Yeah, I was going to say, so your example about the pheno hunt and the strains, after you get to the end of that process and you move forward, you just have these strains that are just in existence. So
yeah, so
it's almost like a periodic wash, scrub or something like that.
It is. I mean, if you're doing, you know, you have a GMO, right? And you have GMO 1, GMO 2.0, GMO 3, all the way down the line, and it was GMO 46 that was the one that we settled on. The
Yep.
person who's going through every single time when they're selecting a strain, when they're building an item, is going to have to select that specific ones, and all the rest are still here. So
It's
that
almost like an item to help alleviate complications downstream. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, and not only in cultivation, but in manufacturing as well, because you see that same problem with concentrates, you'll see that same problem with edibles, you'll see that same problem with any item we create. It could be done wrong, and then it's there forever once we've assigned it inventory. So you have like that one opportunity when you're creating it to do it right. And when you start giving it to other people to in their departments to make their own items as new strains come along, now we need all of it in 8s, now we need it all in 7s, now we need the pre-rolls. So there's just a lot of opportunity there to mess that up, and then you're stuck with it.
Got it. Yep. So let's have John jump on real quick. We'll go to Steve. We'll go to Steve and Jake. I'll have my chance to ask my questions and then do some recap here. But John.
Hi, thanks for the feedback on things like strains that you're no longer using. I don't want to say anything without walking through things and verifying things, but I do know like on things like strains, you do have the option to discontinue them. So I do acknowledge that, yeah, you're right. They kind of get stuck there in the system forever because it's a compliance system. They don't like to ever delete any data. There is, at least for strains, the discontinue option. There may be for a few other items, but it's something that I'll definitely be taking a look at behind the scenes. I hear you. Just having it there on the screen at all can be challenging for some folks. So thank you for that.
Perfect. Let me come off mute. So let's go to Steve and then Jake.
Yeah, I mean, to what Elliot was saying about the items, right, for like manufacturing and even for strains and things like that. I believe you get 24 hours. It'll give you 24 hours to change the name of an item, but after that, like, you know, pheno hunting, like Elliot was saying, I mean, you're not going to know in 24 hours, you know, what you're being left with that you're keeping, right? And changing categories and things like that, like that's instrumental in, you know, determining where an item gets placed to be proper for compliance, right? When it passes down the line, when you're selling wholesale to clients and, you know, eventually to the customers. But yeah, I think it gives you 24 hours, which isn't enough time. There should be no time limit on that. You should be able to go back in and, you know, we started out, we were operational in December of 2020, not knowing a thing, you know, and I created a bunch of items in there, and come to find out I needed to add 0.5 grams onto the name of a particular flavor of a cartridge. So I had to go through and actually create all new items with that 0.5 grams on there. And all of those items have been sitting in my Metrc for almost 2 years now. So, and whenever you go to create a new package, you can quick type in like the first couple letters, and it'll drop down a list of all the items that you have matching those letters. Well, probably over half of those items I don't even do anything with them, but I got to search through all of those, and it takes up time and space when you do it over the long run, you know? So that'd be good to be able to take some of those out of there.
All right, Jake.
Yeah, just following up on this note, it's like a lot of the third-party softwares that we work on do have essentially like a retire feature, and that essentially kind of covers the compliance end of you're never really deleting an item, so the history of that item is always there and something that you can see, but it does kind of take it off that active inventory, which would be a huge help for sure.
Got it. So the one question that I have, and I think I've heard it twice, was about response times for Metrc when we do get ourselves into the situation where there is going to be a touch point there. Have those turnaround times been satisfactory? Are they slowing things down? Is there something that we could do on the state side to help? Well, obviously these conversations are going to help us inform ways to limit those touch points. But in those times that we have to interact with Metrc, Justice.
So one of the areas where we're seeing extended resolution times is if there's an issue with a test. If a test doesn't report correctly from a testing facility, it's taken 5 weeks for us to get 4 to 5 weeks to get a resolution before. So in the meantime, we've already paid excise tax on that product and it's just sitting there and we can't do anything with it. You know, we've had issues recently of 2+ hour hold times. I personally have been hung up on twice. Didn't even bother to say hello, just connect and then click. In the last couple of weeks, that's happened to me twice. So I think we saw initially some improvement from our perspective in their customer service, and it seems to be becoming a little bit of an afterthought.
Elliot.
Yeah, I just want to second what Justice said there. If you get sent to the testing team, if they said, yep, you've got a ticket, it's going to the testing team, that's where things go to die. That's not going to come out of there anytime soon. I mean, you can put that package away. That's going to be hanging out for a little bit. And I think it's oftentimes more difficult because now a lab needs to get involved. You know, your lab needs to be the one to reach out and say, I've passed everything, this thing's still in processing, or you know, this test wasn't selected. So you're involving not only Metrc in your own company, but a lab sometimes as well that needs to be a part of that three-way conversation. But yeah, I would absolutely agree. A 3-hour hold time is very common. Them saying, if you want to hold your place in line, we'll hold your place in line, you can hang up, we'll call you back. I've never been called back. It's just sit on the line for 2 hours. You hopefully will get to talk to somebody, but there is no guarantee of that. And then the other side of it is oftentimes you're bounced around from 3 or 4 different Metrc representatives who I'm giving them a ticket number. So there should be a lineage of what we're talking about here. And every time you have to completely re-explain the process to a whole new person who has really no idea what's been going on. And I kind of thought that was the whole point of the ticket. Like, you would have a walking kind of step of understanding where we've been and what we're trying to do. But each time you're passed off to a new individual, it's like re-explaining yourself to sometimes only get to the end and then say, nah, you got to talk to OCP. That's not us. It's just wild sometimes. So that's definitely the case.
Ben and then Lincoln.
Yeah, I'll just throw in my 2 cents that it does seem that they're picking up the phone less. Like I used to call a lot when I was learning from scratch, and I would often just get somebody. So maybe they don't have more staff for Maine while the program has grown. I don't know. But yeah, you asked if it's how it's changing, and it seems to be less good. I was happy with Metrc for a while, and I would compliment them. Like, man, you guys have great service. And now I don't feel that way.
And Lincoln.
I was just going to add with what Ben said, 100%. It was way faster in the beginning. And we used to get really, really good response times. And then the only other thing I would add is that I would love you guys to give some heat to them to help them be a little bit more responsive. But I would add that I think that the reason we call more than anything is because of issues with the system that were discussed in the last hour and 20 minutes, right? I rarely call because there's a genuine problem. We call because a third-party integration failed, or there was a human error that Metrc shouldn't have allowed to be processed in the first place that went through, or there was just some idiosyncrasy in the system that we can't get around. So that I don't want to discredit the conversation around improving their response times, but I think it's important to note that I think the majority of the recall is because of issues with the product.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. I think, yeah, again, having the conversations and hopefully we get to the point where we have some adjustment to the system that minimize those touch points. So Rebecca, you are on and off. If you want the floor, I'll give it to you. You good?
Yeah, I'm
okay.
good. Thank you.
So 3:20, I still want to have a quick conversation around batch tracking and then make sure that we're all in agreement, or at least level set for an idea of what the agenda for the next meeting is going to look like. But I kind of want to recap these buckets and things that I kind of heard over and over again as we start to flesh out what the continued conversation is going to be. I have training, and certainly there was some additional ideas about how to actually do that and do it effectively. But I'm going to guess the big one was the beginners training, right? But I'm going to guess that ongoing training and type of support would be helpful. Not, or is it just strictly beginning training? Anybody can come off mute.
I would say ongoing would be helpful for sure.
Yeah,
And
ongoing.
if there's any way of getting like some sort of like FAQ, because I know a lot of us are asking the same questions. So it's
Yeah.
like, if there's a way to like sort those questions, group them together, put them into a resource that people can like actually get to, because a lot of times we might not need to reach out, but we don't know how to do something, you know, or something's not working, but just because we're doing it wrong.
So training, gaps in the system. It sounded like specifically around testing and manifests with the APIs not working properly or just not being an efficient process. Automation in certain steps within Metrc to help minimize user error and potentially downstream having to have conversations with Metrc or OCP. A lot around testing, seeing testing information before the transfer, and Metrc support around testing and automation around testing. Industry.
You're muted, Eric.
My back.
There you go.
I am not lying to you folks. My computer does this weird thing where it just randomly mutes me, and then I keep talking like an idiot. So sorry about that. Thank you, John, for that heads up. I don't know where you lost me, but I'm going to go through, just recap the whole thing again. So training, gaps in the system specific to testing and manifests, automation and steps to help minimize the back and forth. Testing, there's a couple different buckets there around testing, certainly. The industry stock reports to help make that more useful. Additional information in those transfers and what that might look like. Conversations around Metrc support. And again, I think I think Ryan was the one that I can't remember who brought it up, but I think the point, no, it was Lincoln, is to basically figure out a way to make the system operate a little bit more efficiently and minimize the touch points either with our office or Metrc, so you folks can just kind of go about and doing your job. So were there any larger buckets that I missed there that I know some of you are taking notes that you certainly want to make sure that we bring up again moving forward? Elliot.
The one that I would really like is just being able to set my homepage. I hate having to go in and make it 500. I hate having to go in and check whether it's my active packages or what location I'm trying to sort from. If I could have some way to, you know, there's a default metric setting where you start at 10 items per page and you start on the active package and you start here, and then I should have a way to customize that. If I want to go in and I want to have it set in this way, always looking at 500, always specifically looking at the kitchen, always specifically looking at a location, just a way to kind of set that up so that we're not doing the same redundant steps over, just so I can see my whole inventory. That would also be helpful.
Cool.
I'll second that.
Perfect.
I'll add to it like a small one. If you're doing a CSV upload, my screen isn't wide enough. So you always have to tab over. And it's like, let's just have buttons that I cannot see them all, you know?
All right, so I'll go back through those again and see, well, as we wrap up this meeting, heading into the next meeting and setting that agenda, we can focus in on some of those just so we can get to more granular details, so we can actually get to actionable steps or recommendations. But is it okay? Let's transfer to batch tracking. And I just want any type of feedback. It's happening, it's coming. And again, we just want to make sure that when we do it, it's in line with your expectations. And we also do have, or I have some questions that I have for the group as we go through partnering with Metrc to make that become a reality. But Steve, you're off mute. I don't know if that means you want to add anything around batch tracking.
Nope. No, I just left it off mute and I'm just keeping quiet so it doesn't pop up.
Perfect. Anybody cultivating, batch tracking, expectations moving forward, excited that it's coming, or I can just jump right into the questions that we have if I can find them. I did write them down. Here we go.
I mean, as far as batch tracking goes, I'm sure we're all interested in not having to pay for as many plant tags. I mean, that's a start, and those plant lists could get pretty long depending on how you're growing, if you're doing sea of green stuff, I mean, you could have hundreds of plant tags in a batch, so I think it's going to be good.
Zach.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm very excited for batch tracking. That was one of the things I was most excited to hear about, and definitely want to commend the OCP on putting this group together. Seems like the state really wants to work with the operators and not just get dictated by Metrc on what Metrc wants to do, because obviously they have a monetary interest in selling more tags or having their system work for them, but not necessarily other API programs. So thank you for getting this going, and yeah, very excited about batch tracking in general to ease that burden when we're working with thousands of plants. Over a very large field. Even the regulators, every once in a while you got to go take that walk around, rain or shine outside. It can be a little tricky, so certainly going to speed things up.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. And we have been working on it in partnership with Metrc and having those conversations. And I will say they have been supportive of making sure that we succeed here in Maine with our individual requirements. So, Ben.
Yeah, really excited. I just want to commend you guys for pushing it forward for one particular reason, which is that, for our business, we're breeding genetics that can really dependably succeed outdoors in Maine, which is no small feat. We're relying heavily on autos. Auto flower plants, I mean, they kind of thrive when you pack them in. So it's been like incredibly frustrating to tag these plants that are out on a 1 foot grid in our tier 4 outdoor. So yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of savings of just like carbon emissions when people can have crops that they're not too onerous to produce outside. So yeah, and I have other like finer details about batch tracking, like as we grow in a production system that looks more similar to typical vegetable agriculture, like if you're growing in native soil like we are, or just long rows, drip irrigation, stuff like that. You might want to have several plantings of the same seed that are going to go in to like fill gaps or whatever. And, I'd like to see functionality for that, and possibly even considering plants that are going to extract as there could be added efficiency for plants that are destined for extraction rather than flower. I guess I could talk more about that, but I'll jump off.
So some of the questions, just so we have a kind of a baseline understanding as we go through this process. The statutory definition of batch, I think the same strain, room, harvest time. Can those that have cultivation operations share your tier size and an estimation of what you think a larger or small or smaller batches would be? So we can just, if anybody wants to hop on with that, Elliot.
So we're a tier 2 cultivation facility, and you have multiple rooms, and then you're balancing kind of what you want your retail store to look like versus what you can bring it through wholesale. So sometimes you don't want to have a ton of plants in there. Each strain is very specific for what it wants with lights, nutrients, its timing. So I mean, we're seeing maybe max 6 strains in a room, and if you have a room that size, you're looking at maybe 75, 80 plants per strain, and that would be your batch. So it would take tagging hundreds and hundreds of plants down to 6 tags. Right. And you wouldn't see that monumental amount of tags going into each room both times. Every time we flip it, every time we push something into its veg phase and it needs to get tagged, move it into the flower room. But yeah, I would say 6 strains, 70 to 80 plants per would be for us what we're seeing. I mean, obviously, if you have an outdoor grow that can have, and you're doing pheno hunts and you're looking for tons of strain, there can be much more. But just for us, what we're looking at, that's about our batch size for the moment. And that's really per room. So the more rooms you get, obviously the more batches you're going to produce on that sense.
So, Elliot, is there a scenario if you're doing 5 to 6 per room and you gave me the number estimation 75 to 80, I can do some quick math, but are you ever doing one strain that takes up an entire the entirety of a room, or is that not happened yet?
It hasn't happened yet, but I wouldn't put it far away. If somebody was going for live and they were doing a fresh frozen harvest of an entire room, you know, you could see one strain going in there, and you know, you have a massive sativa shortage in the market. And if you're doing fresh frozen, you could be smacking an entire room of mimosa, an entire room of whatever. I'm not saying it hasn't happened yet, but I wouldn't count it out. I mean, it's definitely possible. It's
so at your facility and your room size, just like quick math, I mean, that's kind of around 450, 500 plants, right?
Yep. Okay,
cool. Ben, Ryan, Steve.
Yeah, we just did a harvest of autos that was like 300 plants. And that is, we probably have 3,000 tags in the field right now ish. Because we're hunting, you know, we're carrying pollen to the most delicious auto in that row and then taking it all down into fresh frozen. So, you know, we can have really big harvest days where we take down tons of tags, and it's not just the tagging, it's like the weighing each plant. That's really wild. And then it all goes to the same place. It's really, there's no utility to that one piece of data that comes in on a per plant basis. So, I mean, we all know that. That's why the change is happening. We're a tier 4.
Yeah, tier 4 outdoor. All right, Ryan and Steve.
Yeah, we are a tier 3 cultivation, working with kind of larger plants here. So, you know, a typical batch for us would be anywhere from 30 to 120 plants, depending on the strains in the market. We're finding that more strains is always better. So just having more and more flavors going into the market has been helpful. That being said, we'd like it to be as, you know, as easy as possible. And yeah, not really much to comment on here. Just looking forward to that change, just to eliminate the amount of tags we need and moving forward.
Perfect. And Steve.
Yeah, so we've got a tier 2 cultivation right now, and we're stepping up to a tier 3 beginning of next year. And you know, we're gonna have anywhere from 700 plants up to 1,000 plants spread across, you know, flowering and veg and cloning as well. You know, along with the plant tags, you know, saving on that there's also a lot of data entry time that's going to be saved when, instead of weighing out every plant or dividing up a total weight into, you know, however many plants are in that particular batch or that group of that harvest, you know, you're gonna weigh it wet, you're gonna weigh the waste, you're gonna weigh it dry, and then you're good to go, you know, and you're gonna weigh your trim out. So that's gonna save a lot of time having not to manually input all that data into every plant that you're harvesting, you know. And, you know, if you're trying to do 5, you know, maybe 6 turns a year, if you get your timing down right, it adds up. So we're really excited about it.
So high end, low end. Steve, are you indoor or outdoor? You're indoor, right?
We're indoor.
So as far as your what would be considered a batch, same strain, same room, same timing, same growing conditions. What's a high end and a low end?
I mean, we grow in deep water cultures, so we have a set amount of plants, which is 72 per room, and you know, that can be broken down 18 divided by 4. So smallest batch we would run would be 18, and the largest batch we'd run would be 72 in one room. I don't like running 18 just for one because it's not enough, because that'll clear out of retail in about a week. So you want to have those types of variety available for longer than a short period of time.
Got it. Genevieve and then Zach.
So I believe we're tier 4 cultivation facility. But so my concern with the batches would be, we have the 10,000 gram threshold for testing.
Mhm.
So we would have to, this is something that would break our integration again. So we would have to manually go into the system after we bring those batches on and split them down into batches smaller than 10,000 grams.
It's funny you just said that because that, well, you can't see it, but I just wrote down the note, the batch sizes versus testing batch sizes. So that's something that we'll have to think through for sure.
We have to do that. That's like every time we harvest, because it's always wet and you don't get 40,000 because it's wet, or really 50,000 like you probably should. It's, yeah, we do that. It's not ideal.
Zach.
So yeah, tier 4 for us, and as far as batch sizes goes, if we are pheno hunting, it's going to be on the lower range for us. Could be anywhere from 10 to 20 plants, maybe up to 50. And then typically, if we're going for fresh frozen or large scale extraction, even just working with something that does very well outdoors for us, it could be upwards of 100 to 200 plants per batch, sectioned out in different rows.
It's helpful. Great. All right. Looks like we're actually ahead of schedule, which is fantastic. Does anybody want to share anything closing on batch as we continue to make progress on that front for you folks? Or are we good? I mean, that was incredibly helpful. Good.
Is this something that like you could theoretically opt into? I'm just thinking specifically for like keeping mother stock, maybe, I don't know, where you would want to actually put a plant on each tag, or a tag on each plant.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point to bring up, because we have talked to some of our licensees that are still going to, or would prefer to move forward with the individual plant tags for their operational purposes, reasons, whatever it may be. I mean, I have some concerns that, again, the people with the more data-centric background tell me I shouldn't be so worried about, but having two different licensees recording data 2 different ways within Metrc, but there'll be more information on that front that we can communicate. But I would imagine we will try our best to make sure that if you still wanted to do individual plant tags, or you're able to, while accommodating those that want to move to batch.
And also, just to be clear, from the way I've interpreted the law, it seems like a batch could have to be coming from the same mother or the same seed stock. And if that's the case, are we all supposed to be taking these larger batches from the same mother, or are they being taken from multiple mothers?
I could try to answer that, but I would probably get it wrong in this moment. Ryan, we can connect off that to make sure that I understand your question and we get appropriate answer, because I'm sure others on this call, I don't want to give bad guidance right now.
Sure.
I just want to second that the definition of strain is really important to us. Especially, yeah. I mean, it's,
and that, I mean, and that's helpful feedback too, and a helpful question, because when we get to that point, we obviously want to communicate. We'll probably do it through our typical guidance documents, so there's a shared understanding and clarity as we move forward. But Ryan, I can connect with you or Ben to make sure, again, that I understand, and then we can clarify, make sure there's a shared understanding of what's allowed and what's not, for sure. And I guess the last question that we have too, in talking about what batches look like in the statutory definition of batch, I know I called for the last questions, but now I have another one. Is there a scenario where you folks would do partial harvests of what would go in as what might be a batch, but then do partial harvests? I have some nods. If anybody would walk me through that, because that would certainly have implications on how we implemented batch track.
I mean, so here's one. Sorry, I'll just jump in. Like,
yeah.
For our example of, let's say I have 500 autoflowers in the field, and we're looking to carry pollen to a lower branch on some of the most special ones. We might take off the whole crop and leave like a sprig remaining so that we can carry that into next generations. It can be really weird to work with Metrc when you're talking about taking off a few grams of live plant and then taking a few seeds out. Like, it's almost like you want to have an R&D license. But that's just one example. And then certainly with huge plants, you might take all the tops off, and outdoors it matters a lot, or probably indoor too.
Yep.
I was just gonna say that anything's possible in agriculture.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very likely we'll move to manicure batches for certain strains that perform very differently at different times of their life cycle.
Interesting. Rebecca, I saw you nodding, not to put you on the spot. Partial harvests, you could just stay on mute too if you don't want to answer.
Oh, no, you're fine. In agreement that anything can happen in a cultivation. If we need to harvest a certain strain early because there's a dire need for sativas in the industry, and that plant is looking well enough, then we might, harvest half of a genetic in a room. We also do things like fresh frozen manicures. We do batches just given our staff. If we have half of our staff out that's sick, we might not have the full harvest, and we need to be able to have the staff to enter in all that data. So we're really excited moving forward with this new system and being able to have one tag for, a strain in a room. But we are obviously concerned about being able to take partial harvests off of those.
Helpful. All right, that was incredibly helpful for us. Thank you for sharing. I think, what do we got? Just a little over 15 minutes before we wrap this up. Certainly want to get to an idea of what the next meeting and what the agenda will look like. But I'm sure this is a little corny to you folks, but it'll be helpful for us to be able to assess kind of priorities and where folks are and what are the most important buckets that we start talking about and digging into a little bit more. In between, we can develop questions that we need to ask to be able to get at more granular recommendations moving forward. But can we go around the horn and kind of share like your one top priority that we get to? And it can be one of those buckets that we kind of recapped in general, or one specific thing. And we can capture that as we start to flesh out what the next couple of meetings are going to look like. That would be helpful for us. And if you have to, you can share too. But if we can keep it to one, that'd be great. So I'm just going to go around. Steve, your hands up.
Yeah, I didn't really have a specific topic, but a question. Like, is Metrc aware of this group that OCP is working with to come to them with some ideas and things of this nature? Like, are they prepared?
Yeah, no, they know that this working group is happening. Okay. Since the batch tracking and other things that have went down, we've been communicating with them, and they've been a good partner again in helping implement batch tracking, what that's going to look like, how's it going to work best in Maine. They know that the working group is happening. There's been conversations about having them be part of the working group if we want to bring them in when we get into more technical conversations around some of these items in a more granular fashion and how the system is actually developed, and have them possibly join us in a future meeting as well. So yes, they're aware, they're looped in.
Cool, sounds good, thanks.
Buckets, priorities, things that are most important to you that we address. I got Justice.
I think just generally the quality of their database, the quality of their platform, and the quality of the API and the tools that we're given needs to improve. I think that's the basis for me. There's a lot of functionality that should work well that doesn't, that if it did, and if we were given, I'll go and say it again, the ability to use RFID scanning that tied right into our instances, those things would help us out a great deal, particularly some of the larger grows, having those tools and having, the ability to use the tools that are already in the system but don't work well is going to make a huge difference.
Perfect. Ryan, Jake, Elliot, Zach, Rebecca. So Ryan.
Yeah, so I'd just love to see one of the buckets, automation of the redundant processes that we're having to do. Justice brought up a great point. We've had, a couple thousand plant tags go through this place, and never has one been scanned with any sort of RFID scanner. And yeah, just looking forward to seeing where this goes, but just, trying to make it as easy as possible for us. Oh, one last thing. Whenever we do demos with software companies, we're always looking for them to have sort of like almost like a firewall where tasks or things that other employees do go before they hit the database. So if there's a way that like at 5 o'clock, Rebecca, she's our track and trace manager, like she got a ding that said, hey, these are the moves that happened. Can you go in and just approve these before end of day? That way we could kind of avoid any compliance errors. Not a lot of these software companies can accommodate that, but that's just something we always try to ask for.
Perfect. Jake.
That's tracking and final form testing and the ability for that to work through Metrc without being hung in the testing phase. And, you know, just the size of the test batches is really key moving forward.
Elliot and then Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I think just going through and being able to actually, I mean, a lot of the points that people are bringing up, I really agree with. So just a side one, being able to change and edit items. I also agree with the education. I also agree with reducing the redundancies. But another one to tack on there, being able to change an item in some way so that we don't consistently keep running into this would be great to do. And then as others stated, just the response time from Metrc, if we could get some sort of movement on that and how they help us to alleviate some of these problems, that would also be great.
Great. Zach, Rebecca, Carrie, John. Well, no, people are moving. Zach, Rebecca, Eddie.
Yeah, I think just overall communication would be great. Even just the way that they oftentimes release guidance documents, it says this is effective today. There's no heads up. It's sometimes a major compliance change that can really catch a lot of users off guard. And I think, again, going back to testing and just having better communication, maybe even like an actual hard set minimum response time or maximum response time where they're held accountable to that so people don't get stuck, in that gray area of in progress.
Perfect. Rebecca, Eddie, Carrie, John, Matt, Judge, and then Ben.
So I'm going to agree with being able to change items after we have created something, being able to reverse adjustments. But my biggest concern is getting a universal training for Maine's compliance in Metrc. You have a whole YouTube channel on how to use Metrc, but it doesn't really zone into what we in Maine need to have. And that falls in line with what I've heard a lot today on having, as simple as having right in the first line of what we're receiving into a storefront to say with the package tag and the name of the item, the THC percentage and the harvest date, everything that's required to go on the label. If we could see that in one line, that way we have the ability to either reject a package or accept it right there, instead of having to accept something into the system and then having to send it back and having this whole issue.
Perfect. Eddie, Carrie, John, Matt, Ben.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate my number one is opening up the API for manifests. I can't even begin to go down the rabbit hole of how many hours our team has wasted doing tedious work in Metrc when that could be available, surfaced in the API. It would be so incredibly helpful. And when I asked before, Metrc has cited something to do with security is the reason that they haven't opened this up. Whatever it is, they gotta be able to fix it and provide access and not just put up an excuse and say, no, we're never gonna get to that. It's gotta be done.
Carrie, John.
Yeah, I have to agree with everyone that the being able to adjust items after a 24-hour period would certainly reduce a lot of headaches. My robust manufacturing facility, and then certainly communication from the state on what you guys are looking for in terms of how we should be using the software, and then also with Metrc. So I went online with Metrc in April of this year, and I have never resolved an issue on the same day. And I've had a lot of tickets that have been in the 2 and 3 week windows. So it's just been really frustrating, but I hope it's going to get better. So thank you.
Yeah, Matt.
I want to say I agree with every point that's been brought up today, but I think we have a great group here. But I want to reiterate what Eddie said. Opening up the API for manifesting would save everybody a tremendous amount of time who uses API, uses third-party software. And I really just don't buy their argument that it's a security issue. So I'd like that explained at least. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt. And we'll wrap it up with Ben.
My number one thing is making more things doable through CSV uploads. Anytime I'm putting information into like a dialog box, anything can be a row in a spreadsheet. Let's do it. Yeah, specifically too, like we could have Excel uploads. I don't like having to like custom, like specifically format as text my date entries. If Metrc could read Excel date formatting, that would make it more usable.
Does anybody else want to share anything before I put a bow on this? Okay, so as far as next steps are concerned, this was incredibly helpful for us to understand your priorities and the different buckets that we need to have more in-depth conversation. I think we'll kind of take these back, go through them internally, and start to kind of flesh out what the next agenda is going to look like, which ones are the highest priority for you folks, and really formulate the questions that we're going to need to ask to be able to get to the granularity that we're going to need and have recommendations to move forward with. We're certainly not going to get to all of them in the next meeting that we have. So when the agenda goes out, which we'll send it out to you folks well ahead of the next meeting, just so that we can have a back and forth with feedback, they'll be on following meetings. But hope to have that together and to you folks well ahead of the second meeting. And just a reminder, it's September 13th from 2 to 4. So I'll just say this, this has been incredibly eye-opening and incredibly helpful from our perspective, and really looking forward to the next few meetings and putting together that report and recommendations to move forward to make the system basically work for everybody. I certainly think we can do it. I certainly know that we do have an open and good partner in Metrc for this moving forward. But having said that, unless there's no other comments or concerns or anybody want to hop on, we can put a wrap to this first meeting. Again, this has been great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And you will see communications from us in the coming days. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.